Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this week's midweek chat. This week, I got a chance to have an online conversation with my friend Fiona, who is a counselor in Portlaoise. And I got to sit down and ask her some questions about our mind, which I hope that you will find helpful and encouraging and even practical in this season that you find yourself in. So God bless you, and thanks for joining me. We're going to have our midweek chat, and I asked Fiona to join with us today. Thankfully, you don't have to just see me, to see Fiona. And I've known Fiona, I suppose it's been over 15 years now. Amazingly, time flies.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so some of the things that I've seen Fiona journey through, if I remember correctly, is early on she went to Australia for a while, and then
New
trained as an
Zealand, but
New
close.
Zealand, close. She trained as an
Hmm.
architect in Dublin. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then for a season, you worked in a center that helped women with addictions. And
Yep.
then
Yep.
from there, and I know there's a lot going on as well, besides what I'm bringing up, but then you went on to study counseling and have become a counselor,
Yeah.
along with being a
Hmm.
wife and a mom and running a farm and building a house. Uh, and so, is there anything you'd like to add on to that introduction of yourself?
Well, well, sometimes, when I get a form at the bank or like for my kids' school and it says, "What is your profession?" I'm like, this line is not long enough to describe.
Yes.
So, and I've often asked God, why did you make me like that? Why have I done so many things? And He just always tells me it's His tapestry. It will all make sense in the end. So, but
Yes.
I definitely see common threads, and God is drawing some of the threads together. And even studying architecture to then becoming, as God has really showed me, interested in the architecture of the mind and the internal world of people, as well as the external world that people live in. But I'm just really interested in seeing people set free from unnecessary suffering. I remember when I was very young, my sisters joking that I didn't like people. Sorry, sisters, if you're watching. I can't even remember which one. And that just being something over my life. And I remember at a certain stage when I was in New Zealand on my missions training course, God had just brought all these young women around me who just would share their lives with me and would just seek me for counsel and conversation and friendship. And God showed me He had literally turned that upside down, that He had taken me from somebody who kind of ran away from people to somebody who just had a great heart for people. I just love people, and I love seeing them get set free and not suffer when they don't need to suffer. And I love the beauty of God's creation, and I love worship. So many things. But I love seeing God's fingerprints on all of those things, I suppose, and seeing the common threads. So yeah, hard to sum me up in a nutshell, no, but that's a little bit of it.
Very good. And so you mentioned, so you have a great interest in the mind, which is wonderful, because part of the reason that I wanted to have a conversation or a chat with you was because it's been something that has been highlighted to me in this time, my thinking. And I remember when I came to Ireland in the early days, uh, I would be saying goodbye to somebody and I would say, "See you later." And they would say to me, "Mind yourself." And I'd never heard that before. And I thought that was a
Yeah,
wonderful saying, "mind
yeah,
yourself."
that's a good one.
So it's like,
Mhm.
and it just always, I know now I just say it without even thinking, but at the time I was like, "mind yourself." Okay, so I guess they're saying, take care of myself and make sure that
Mhm.
the next time that we meet, because I'm saying see you later, that I'm well and I'm healthy and we're going
Yeah.
to have a great time together again. And And so I've been kind of pondering this, mind yourself. And, my
Mhm.
perspective, I'm a pastor, and I'm looking at the scripture, and one of the verses, that's been highlighted to me is, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then as I
Yes.
went through the scriptures in the New Testament, I found it talks about the mind a lot, actually. Says stuff like, have
Mhm.
this same mind in yourself as what Christ Jesus had. Um, be made new in the attitude of your mind, renew your mind. Says stuff like, set your mind on things above. And so I just kind of wanted to have a conversation with you, though, because I'm
Mhm.
kind of processing all of this myself in God's word. But I wanted to hear some of your thoughts on the mind. And you can take it where you want to, but maybe some of the mental challenges that, people are facing. What do you feel like they can do to keep a healthy mind in the midst of
Mhm.
what's going on, and being locked in a house, or being in an intense situation in work, or whatever? What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, wow. Well, where to start, Noel? I've had lots of thoughts personally, lots of thoughts for my clients and the people I care about, my family, extended family, and then the world. There's so much happening in such a short space of time. It's not really possible to even let your thoughts catch up to where we are today. Things have changed even from yesterday. But I love that emphasis that God gives us, that God holds the mind, and if we were to delve into it, the connection between the self, the spiritual self, and the self who I think I am, who's in there thinking, that mind that's thinking thoughts, he really does care about. We know that we're a new creation, our spirits are new, but he also wants us to be doing this renewing work on our mind. And I love that word renew. I think another definition for it, when you look up that Strong's Greek, whatever word it is like renovate or rebuild, you know. And I just think of that idea of like when we become a new creation, that here we are in this new house. We moved into a really old cottage, and we had to tear lots of stuff out, have a vision for how it's going to be, and then put new in and build new. So there's lots of building to be done. And I think what this time is revealing is maybe some of the cracks in the structure. So we're being put into like a pressure cooker. It's like that stress test we were talking about the other day that doctors do sometimes on people's hearts. They make them exercise to see how well their heart can process the oxygen and the blood flow. And I suppose the whole world at the same time is being put under this stress test, and that's very revealing. When you exercise or when you try to go upstairs carrying 3 kids, your whole system is put under pressure, and then it truly reveals what normal day-to-day life might not reveal. These times of stress are making obvious. So yeah, and I think the whole spectrum of what people are experiencing all falls within normal, like the normal reactions, because what we're in is actually a time of disaster. And there's a whole literature about disaster, and how people react and process and deal with disaster psychologically, how they manage in their minds. Um, but this is unique. I heard somebody talk about, like, is this like the Second World War? Well, no, it's not like the Second World War, because in the Second World War, all the communities got out there together and they met up and they had parties and they knew where the enemy was. But this is unique because it's an enemy that we can't see. And I might even be bringing the enemy to my elderly aunt's door unknown to myself. It's a very hard one to process. And so it's the unknownness of it, but at the same time, it is a disaster, and human beings have been through disaster before.
Yeah.
Um, and there's an amazing capacity within us to come through disaster. And that's the other thing. But I suppose two of the things it's really highlighting to me is that what you're saying, like, for those who are alone during this time, and even for those of us who are in a very busy household with small kids, Still there's an aspect of isolation, and God told us it's not good for man to be alone, and why? Well, what's it revealing right now? Well, it's revealing, actually, I heard that, there's this phrase that Jordan Peterson used, that we outsource our sanity to other people. That somehow one of the things that God uses to keep us sane and to grow us is other people. And when we don't have them around, there can be this real shaking that can happen inside of people. So we can talk about some of the things that people might do if they're experiencing some of that shaking inside. And then the other thing that I'm really seeing highlighted is, as a culture on the whole, all of the fear and anxiety that people are experiencing really comes back to a fear of death. I think Tim Keller was talking about this on Easter Sunday, how when the church kind of is getting thrown out of society, people are losing grip on how to deal with that fear of death. And that anxiety is coming out in really unique ways as a culture. But of course, we as a church have a really unique and different perspective. So I think that's a place where we have something really to offer. But for the spectrum of what anybody, Christian, non-Christian, what we're going through right now, like we're going through that process of, first it was the disbelief and the denial and then maybe anger and then anxiety and worrying. And we have this capacity to, as humans, we have these brains that can be anxious about things that have not happened yet. And so we can have suffering mentally about things that haven't happened yet. And we can also be suffering with other people. So like I was saying to you the last day, like one thing I've had to really watch is how much I'm empathizing with others' suffering all over the world right now. There's so much suffering, there's so much anxiety, that because I'm a person who feels a lot for others, how do I manage that almost over empathizing with others? So there's a lot going on. And then I suppose the question is, how are people coping with this? And what are people turning to with all of these feelings? What are people turning to? So are they turning to overeating? Guilty as charged. Or, what are we turning to? Are we becoming more argumentative in our relationships? Are we turning
So
to Netflix?
You said
Or
one time,
healthy ways to.
You said the last time we were talking about kind of numbing it, and so that's a little bit what you're talking about. What are we doing to treat ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the first reaction that people often have is, I'm having uncomfortable feelings.
mm-hmm.
How do I numb it?
Yeah.
Instead of looking, what am I going to do with these feelings? Well, let me apply something to numb that feeling. And while that might be short term, that might be a good strategy to get through, but I suppose we could talk about some of the maybe healthier things that we could do to move towards growth and finding healthy ways of dealing with those.
You also, when we talked before, you also mentioned that you think that this is a unique opportunity for us as people to grow.
Yeah. And that's really not to minimize the suffering that has or is or will happen. It's really not, but it's just that I really see in situations like this. So, I don't know why the story of the three little pigs came to mind. This is the kid's story. The wolf came along and he blew at the straw house and it fell down, and he blew at the stick house and it fell down. And then the little piggies figured out that they needed to build a brick house, and then they were safe. So, and like when we exercise, when we do that exercise, our muscles get stressed, but then they get stronger as a result. And I think there really is an opportunity in this time from lots of different angles, but there is an opportunity to exercise a muscle of the mind that we've not had to use before. And so that's in developing resilience and grit, and developing our capacity for compassion with others. And it's also in the area of processing things within ourselves that we didn't know were there. And but also as a church, like I was saying, to offer that hope to the world. Well, there are opportunities for us to confront our own fear of death, see what's there, and then realize, oh wait, actually we live with a resurrected Jesus. Death no longer has a hold over us. So I don't know if you heard that, that Facebook video that went viral recently of was a young man at his mother's funeral. She had cancer and they had been praying for her. And he said, we were praying that either she'll live or she'll live. Either she'll be with family or she'll be with family. She'll be well or she'll be well, because she's a Christian and she knows where she's going. So either there's going to be this outcome here or on earth, or there's going to be the outcome in eternity. And we have that hope, I suppose, which to me was really, that's one opportunity. But there is also an individual opportunity, right? Because there's a reordering of priorities happening now, because so much of normal life has just been shoved to the side, and people are being confronted with what's really important. And many people might come out of this time going, you know what, I was living a life that really does not align with what my actual priorities are, or in light of eternity, what my priorities could be. So that might also be an outcome. Sorry, that's lots of different thoughts there, no? But
yeah, no, that's very good. So from your perspective, now with, I know we could speak to all kinds of different situations, but maybe practical from where you're sitting and what you think maybe people are going through. I know we can't speak to everybody, but what's a practical thing that we could have, maybe a takeaway from our chat to kind of go through this? Because it's an opportunity for growth, but also there's real feelings of challenge, right? So
yeah.
maybe you have a thought on practical way to deal with those two things, kind of.
Yeah, well, obviously we could talk all day about them in one way, but I suppose a few simple things that I would be encouraging people to do. There's lots of practical things I could talk about that would help people, like, maintaining routine is super important right now, eating well, exercising, but I think people know that. Where to me it gets really interesting is, what Paul says, like, I don't do the thing I want to do and I do the thing I don't want to do, is like when the rubber hits the road and you're not in this moment leading the life that you feel that you could or should or would, and these anxious thoughts maybe are overtaking you. I like to think about it to say, if you were to think about your thought life, your internal myself inside who's thinking and suffering, maybe in my thought life, if I was to think about that as being my child. So if my child came to me saying, I'm really anxious, I'm really struggling, I'm really suffering, what would I tell my child? Would I say, no, you shouldn't feel that way? Would I say, well, just go distract yourself? Well, just get busy doing this? No, what my child needs in that moment is to be acknowledged. They need to have that big, huge feeling that they're having and it's overpowering them. They need to have it acknowledged. And the amazing thing about the brain is that actually, as soon as you name an emotion, a thought, it becomes tame. So you name it to tame it. So the first thing I would say to people is, it's really tempting to numb all the time, and you may need to some of the time, but I would be encouraging people to take some time to be quiet. The Bible has so much wisdom. You can see David in the Psalms took time. Why are you downcast, O my soul? He got in touch with what was going on inside. He just took a moment, not to numb, although he probably did that at times, and he just noticed what was going on. So just first step is just noticing in the morning, pacing, and then breathe and notice what's going on in my body, because our body often gives us very big clues. So it's taking a moment to come together, to be one, like in your mind and your body and your spirit, and just notice what's going on. And then to acknowledge it, to just say, wow, I'm actually feeling quite fearful today. I'm feeling quite anxious. I'm feeling quite sad, or resentful, or bitter, or whatever it might be that's coming up. And you might think that there's huge big steps that have to happen after that, and for some people, though, just doing that might be so overwhelming that they might need help unraveling some of those. But for most people, actually just acknowledging that can be huge, because it's like it's a kindness to yourself that you're finally sitting with that and acknowledging that's what's going on right now. And it might remind you about something in the past that is a bit overwhelming to you, or it might give you conviction about something that you need to do. But actually just sitting, first of all, is the next step. And then the step after that is that renewing, that like reconstructing. Once I've taken that and said, well, that's a thought I don't want in there, then how do we renew the mind? How do we reconstruct, rebuild, bring in what we actually want to be there? And spending some time, which I'm sure, Noel, you're going to be talking about next few weeks. What do we put in there from God's word, from things that we know to be true? Yep. They're just
Yeah,
some
so,
practical things. I don't know if that
I really like that, because sometimes I think we can be super spiritual and only think about like the vertical. And but I like this, that this is a little bit maybe outside of some of our box, is to allow ourselves to look at where we actually are right now, horizontally, like what am I feeling actually, and name it, like even speak it out or write it out, like you're saying. I think that's really cool, a cool idea, in order to then deal with it with the Lord too. So, and obviously, like you said, David did that kind of stuff too. Is there anything else you wanted to add into that? I think that's excellent. Or can I ask?
Yeah, well, I think like just a good analogy for that. It's sometimes just taking that one bit out of the way, that can be, well, for me, I found in the last few weeks, those bits of that anxious thought or that fearful thought, they were really distracting to hearing from God and connecting with him. So when I was able to just get those pieces out, put it down on paper, then somehow I was just could breathe a sigh of relief and just remember who I was in him. And also, like, some of that work, on a practical level, I would just say, like, we live in a practical physical world as well. And if you hear a noise in your car engine when you're driving it, you pay attention, and at a certain point to say, well, I need to go to the mechanic about that, or I need to lift the hood and look at that. And I would just say people's minds are the most precious thing probably that they've been given by God. And so don't ignore the little clanking under the hood. Don't numb it. Don't just throw in some extra oil and not wonder where the leak is coming from. It's a time that it's worth doing. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just one of the analogies. Like, do your NCT, service the engine.
It's worth it. Yes, good. I know we could as well. I'd like to ask you more maybe about not only just us internally, but our relationships with others. But I think we'll run out of time. So maybe I can do that another time with you.
Yeah.
But
I think that's a good idea.
I also just, I know that there's then, this, what you've said is practical for people, all of us, right? Because we're all going through this. But then there's some people that maybe just feel like, maybe they just feel totally overwhelmed right now, and don't feel like they're able to manage at the moment. And did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, well, one of the little phrases that I got on my counseling course from one of our tutors, she used to say, the greatest gift you can give to others is a healthy you. And sometimes we can think about it like, oh, I shouldn't need help, I shouldn't get help, so on and so forth. But I've been determined as a mother, that was our little catchphrase for our Nurturing Mums group. The greatest gift I can give my kids is a healthy me. So I want to challenge people, if you're finding it hard to reach out, talk to somebody in your family, talk to anybody, or get any sort of help for any of these things, the greatest gift you can give to humanity, and I think also back to God, is for you to be healthy in your body, your mind, and your spirit, your soul. So but for those who, I think for most people this is going to be a challenging time, and I would say find a support group, find someone that you connect with. Thank God for the internet and social media and ways that we can connect. But there will be a certain percentage of people, we know there were a certain percentage of people anyway before this happened, who needed extra help. That engine had just had one too many things happen to it at the same time, and it needed to go to the mechanic. that mind had one too many difficulties laid on top of it, and it needed some extra help. And that's what I want to do with my life, is just to be there for people at that moment when they're just, life is just too much. So first of all, I would just say to people, you don't know, well, should I go for help? If you're having suicidal thoughts, thoughts of ending your life, thoughts of hurting yourself or hurting others, there is hope. You are not stuck with that. Reach out, contact us. We want to be there. We want to help. And even if it's not maybe that bad, there's a spectrum of suffering that I know people are going to be going through right now. And if you are a person, you just feel like, I'm not doing well, I'm not healthy, and I can't pull myself through this time, and you shouldn't have to. I have been working as a counsellor in my little office in Life Church in Portlaoise, and now my work is moving online, and so I just wanted to use this opportunity. I just really felt in my heart that I want to offer free online sessions to people during this time who might need it. So it might be you, or it might be somebody you know. I'd be encouraging people to connect in and ask the deeper question, not just the, hey, how's it going? But just asking, really, are you doing okay? And so if you know somebody that might need to avail of that service, or if you yourself would like to, I'll be offering 5 sessions a week while we're on lockdown. And I think Noel will leave details maybe for how you can get in touch through the church with me, or people who know me directly. So please don't be shy, please get in touch, please don't suffer unnecessarily, because the church needs everybody. We're an army. God made hands and feet and head and everything, and he wants all of us to play a part. So my hope, I know Noel and Heather's hope, is to see everybody well and whole and healed and knowing who they are in Christ, so that they can be part of that army, you know. So sorry, I'll stop rambling on now, Noel.
That's
wonderful. Maybe you can explain to people how they could get in touch. Or
yeah, so you're making yourself available for an online session, and so if anybody is interested in that, then you can reach out to Fiona if you have her information, or if you'd like, you can just email the church or ring the church. The email is info@lifechurch.ie. And really appreciate hearing from you, Fiona. I hope we can do this one more time again, if you'll let me have a chat with you and maybe talk about a few more things that are coming into my mind as we go. And
yeah, I hope it was helpful to somebody. And just to say, Noel, we really appreciate what you are doing and all the resources that you're putting out there for people. I know it's a lot of work, and hats off to you, but it's been really good. I've been really blessed.
My pleasure, my privilege. So thanks, everybody. We hope you have a great weekend, and God bless.